we have a graph out in front of us. I'm just going to go through a quick graphing reminder, graphing tutorial. So there's a whole bunch of things on the side that I'm going to label across my graph. So we're going to start with the x and y axes. So the x-axis is the horizontal axis going across the graph. So I will just label that guy right beside him as the x-axis. The y-axis is the vertical axis. Also going just up the middle or down the middle there. So both of those have been labeled. They're both on our graph. Now, there's a trick to remember the x-axis, and that it's the horizontal one, and the y-axis is the vertical one. With some tips about how to remember the x and the y-axis if you are having trouble doing so. So the x-axis is the horizontal axis going across the graph. So what you have to do, make your arms into an X shape, just like this, and then you just collapse them. And there you have a horizontal line made with your arms. So that's how you remember the X. And then for the Y, you do basically the same thing, but instead you're making a Y with your arms, and you just collapse them together, and it's a vertical line just like the y-axis is. So just make sure you collapse them the way they would naturally go, and you have the axes. So that's a nice little trick if you're having trouble remembering. So the x-axis, horizontal, the y-axis, vertical. The next thing that I'm going to label is are my quadrants. Okay, so I have 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is this guy right here. So this is quadrant number 1. I'm going to label it with Roman numerals, so it looks like an I. This is my quadrant number 1. This is where the y and the x values will both be positive, is in quadrant 1. For my next quadrant, quadrant 2, I just move over. So quadrant 2 is just over here, side by side. So this is where the y is still positive, but the x is negative. Then I go down, following the loop for quadrant 3. This is where the x and the y are both negative. And then lastly, quadrant 4 is over in this corner. This is where the x values are positive, but the y values are negative. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We start in that top right corner, and then we just move counterclockwise to get the quadrants labeled. So that's done. The next thing that I'm going to label is called the origin. So the origin is actually just a point on the graph. It falls right smack dab in the middle of this graph. It's where the x and the y axes both intersect, so that's where they cross over each other. And it has a value, so it has an actual point at 0, 0. So that's where the x value is 0 and the y value is 0. And this is, once again, this is the origin. So I can label that guy. Okay. Then I have a variety of points that I'm going to go through. So the first point that I have is 4, 6. Okay. If you can't figure out if the 4 is a y or the 4 is the x value, what I recommend doing is singing yourself the alphabet. So if I sang the alphabet all the way through, I would get towards the end of it where x and y come in, and x comes before y in the alphabet, which means that in our coordinate points, the x value is going to come before the y value. So the x is 4 and the y is 6. I'm just going to write that below, that we get the x value first and the y value next. So when I go to plot this on my graph, what I want to do is go across the x-axis until I hit that space where x will be 4. and then I'll go up or down the y-axis until I hit the next number value of 6. So I know it's not labeled on this graph, but I'm going to say that every little line on this scale is just worth 1. So when I want to find the point 4, 6, I go across my x-axis until I hit the value 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to go up my y-axis to get to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there is my point 4, 6. So that guy is on the graph as well. I can do my next point on here, which is -7, 2. So this time, again, I'm going to focus on my x value first. I'm going across the horizontal x-axis until I hit -7. So I have to go towards the negatives in the direction left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That'll be -7 because I went towards the left side of my graph. And then I just have to go up 1, 2 to plot the 2 as the y value. So this guy, -7, 2. Okay, then I can do my next value, which is 3, -5. Again, y-axis first, 1, 2, 3, then I'm going down into the negatives for the y value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And plotting 3, -5 as my next point. If my axes were labeled with the scale, so if I had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. going up and going down into the negatives for the y-axis, going up into the positives for the x and down into the negatives for the x, if I had all of those numbers labeled on here, it would be easy to find the points because then I wouldn't necessarily have to count them. I can just line up the values on my graph. My next point is -8, -10. Not that counting them is actually difficult, but just a heads up, there's another way to do it if your graph scale is labeled. So for -8, -10, I'm going in the negative direction on my x values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm at -8. And then I have to go down into the negative values for my y's. -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gets me all the way to the bottom. And it would be -10 since I went downwards. For my point, -8, -10. I don't know why I already checked it off, but there we go. The next one I'm doing is 0, 3. So that means that my x value doesn't move from the 0. So I'm actually going to go up on the y-axis this time. So I don't have any x value, it's just 0. And then I go up 1, 2, 3 on the y-axis, or axis, I should say. And I get the point 0, 3. The next point is kind of the opposite, because this time I have an x value, but my y value is just 0. So I'll go across my x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But then I don't have to move up or down on my y-axis since the y value is just 0. So there is my point 7, 0. And the next two are very similar as well. Again, we only have one value at a time. So the next one, -9 is my x value. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 going in the negative direction on the x-axis. And I don't have to move up or down because my y value is just at 0. And then the last one, basically the opposite. I have, oops, I've used that color already. I'm running out of colors finally. Pick this one. Okay. 0 is my y value, so I don't have to move anywhere across this. I just stick to kind of that origin point, but now I'm going to move up or down for my y value. Down 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to that -4. And there I have the point 0, -4. So that was just a nice quick graphing review to showcase how to plot points, which are your axes, which are your quadrants, and what the heck the word origin means. So the origin is just the point 0, 0. Remember that when you're plotting points, you always read them from left to right, X to Y. X comes before Y in the alphabet, so X comes before Y on this graph as well. I realized just now that my camera didn't show you the full picture. Fortunately, it was just missing a couple of things. Now you can see that the y-axis is on the top here. My quadrants go 1, 2, 3, 4, around in that kind of orientation. And these are the things over here that I was labeling as I was going. So I don't think you guys miss much by not having that view. Sorry I didn't notice it in the beginning.